Welcome to Two Woke Bonnets, a podcast where we revisit the classic TV shows of our Gen X childhoods and see how well they hold up today. With your hosts, Carol and Joey.
Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Two Woke Bonnets, where we watch old episodes of Little House on the Prairie and just see how they hold up in a modern day setting. My name is Carol.
My name is Joey.
And first off, we would like to thank our friend Mikey Mason, who did an intro and outro for us. So thank you, Mikey.
Yay!
Much love to you. We love Mikey. So
we love him.
Yeah.
Yes,
so for this episode, we are talking about the 100-mile walk and Mr. Edward's homecoming.
But before we start, if you haven't been to twowokebonnets.com, you may want to go and do that because we do have a bingo card that you can download. And we will be editing versions of the bingo card because you may find that some of the things that we have on there happen more in later seasons, but It was a great idea from a listener, and so we put one together and we'll continue to modify that as we go along. So if you have good ideas for us, you can email that to twowokebonnets@gmail.com. So
twowokebonnets@gmail.com. Sorry, I stepped on you there. But yeah, that thing will be completely written over once Albert comes onto the scene. So
yes.
So the 100-mile walk. The moral of this one, I suppose, is don't count your chickens before they're hatched, or be careful where you put that dynamite.
Spoiler.
This episode starts with Charles in his field of wheat. It's fully grown, and he's thanking God for the bountiful harvest. And then God looks down and goes, "Oh yeah, I meant to destroy that crop. Here, give me a moment here." And then they all sit down. They all sit down to spend the money that they think they're going to get from the crop, which is about $2,600.
Yes.
Yeah, the girls sit there and do their arithmetic on their slates and figure out how much money they're going to get, and they're determining what they're going to spend it on when it starts raining and hailing.
Yes,
a lot.
And one of the things that they talk about is curtains on the windows, which you realize later. You can see into Mom and Pa's bedroom really easily, which is weird because Carrie's bedroom is ahead of that, but yet.
Well, her bed is. I don't know why you don't see Carrie through the window.
Well, we don't see Carrie a lot in the
No, we don't. And she rarely speaks. I don't think she speaks at all. Oh, no, there's a hilarious part. I don't think we see Carrie much at all in this episode. But, before the rain starts, Pa bought horses, or at least he got them on credit from Mr. Hanson.
Yes. And which, can we just talk about this? Pa very clearly states, cash in the barrel head. That's why the girls have to go get their Christmas pennies for their slate pencils in the previous episodes. And then Pa walks out. Now, your first hint that this is not going to go well is that he doesn't even let them name the horses.
No. And he snuck them in somehow.
But he gets them on credit. Have we learned nothing from O'Brien? Do not get things on credit, Pa. It does not work well for you.
And he somehow sneaks these two full-grown horses. These are not foals. These are full-grown horses into the barn, and nobody sees him.
Through a field with no trees.
Yeah, it's just
no trees.
No
How
trees.
Did you sneak this in?
But it doesn't matter because those horses are not long for that barn. Because the hail comes, and Pa rushes out there to, I don't know, watch it. He's not going to put a tarp
to see
over
if he could save it. Put his hands over 100 acres and go, no, this isn't going to happen.
So and he comes back in, and you spotted a goof here because he comes back in soaking wet.
Well, from IMDb, because I got to do my research. But he comes in. So the first time he's swearing under his breath, and he's running out, and he's miserable. And we have one of those knowing glances as they continue to look at the rain, and they know. And he comes back in, and now he's trying to be all chipper about it. It's it's just a little rain. And he's like, but this coffee will help me out. And he reaches into the fire with coffee that's clearly been sitting there for a while over a flame And he just picks it up and pours coffee into his cup.
Yeah, that is a metal coffee pot.
Over a hot flame.
Yeah.
And we have previously seen Ma get things out of there, and she always uses a towel to get it out. He never reaches in there. So
Pa is a hardened farmer. His hands are just like leather.
No, we find out that's not true too.
That's not true. That's totally not true. We find that out. So the wheat is, I don't want to say it's demolished because that's too harsh a word, as we will soon see. The wheat is smooshed.
Yes, it's flat.
It's flat. He can't use Hanson's nifty thresher to harvest it. So in Pa's mind, the wheat is gone.
Yes.
And the next day
he gives up very quickly, as we know.
Very, very quickly. It's like, oh, the wheat's gone. And the very next day,
and all the men do. Yeah. All the men do.
The very next day, he's bringing the horses back to Hanson. And there's farmers there who are looking to borrow money from poor Hanson, who doesn't have it.
He's like, I'd love to give it to you. The guy's like, I only need $200.
And then there's this one farmer named Jimmy who's got 5 kids, and his wife done come down sick.
And he's like, stop. I can't even help you.
I can't give you anything.
Lars is just like, stop. Just stop. Okay.
Can we also talk about how everybody in this episode calls Charles Charlie?
Well, I think that's, yeah. But, yeah.
Because Hanson calls him Charlie. Here,
Hanson, I didn't hear Hanson do it. I just
heard
he
did.
Jack, but we haven't gotten to Jack yet.
Charlie. It's like the writers were like, we're going to float this Charlie thing and see if it works. And it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It's got to be Charles. So then Pa decides, hey, that's it. Once again, times are tough. So what does Pa do? He packs up his kit and caboodle and he wishes his family goodbye, which he goes down the line. He hugs Caroline. He hugs Mary. He hugs Half Pint. He pets Jack. Where's Carrie? Carrie is nowhere. Don't tell me you've used up your 8 hours with Carrie, because the girl doesn't say anything in this episode.
She must be in the outhouse or something, because he literally looks at Carolyn and goes, "Give Carrie a kiss for me."
I know. He's like, yeah. Yeah, I know I'm going. Carrie. It could be months and months and months, he says.
And there's no time frame on this episode ever at all. You have no idea how long this episode, what the time frame is of this episode.
He's like, well, it could be months. Gotta go. And he walks off, and he also walks off without his gun.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, Caroline, things are getting really hard. I'm going to leave you with 2 steer. I'm going to leave you with 3 Carols to take care of.
And no money.
You can figure this all out, because I got to go.
I got to go find some work. And
we find out that going to Mankato is a long walk.
Yeah, because it's like...
Because we need to keep that in mind for later, because suddenly they go to Mankato all the time as we go along.
Yeah, it's easier.
But in the beginning, it's a very long walk.
And I don't understand why he doesn't take the carriage.
Well, because he doesn't have the horses and he has to leave the steer. He would have to figure out how to feed the steer as he was going along. I don't know.
I was almost certain.
A lot of things. He also leaves his gun behind.
Yeah.
After he's been chased by a pack of wolves in previous episodes. Now we're just leaving our gun behind. Yeah. Willy-nilly.
So he goes walking off and he meets 2 people along the way. First up is Jack Peters,
who's standing there talking to his wife in this vast, like, barren area. There's one house.
Through their yard.
He walks through their yard and doesn't even look up and acknowledge that this guy and his wife are having some kind of a tearful conversation. He's just like, no, gotta walk along.
Gotta walk with my torn up boots. But Jack is, so Jack is Irish, and he's not as...
Is he Irish or is he... I thought he was just kind of Cockney British.
I thought he was Irish.
Okay.
But either
definitely from the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
We can agree on that. Okay.
I was like, well, so here's not a sneaky Irishman. Maybe they're getting away from that stereotype. Instead, we have a feisty Irishman who's good with explosives, because that's a much better... He does this thing where he spits on his palm and thumbs his nose. I cringe every time. it's bad. It's terrible. But his wife's like, Jack, you're gonna kill yourself doing this job. You're gonna blow yourself up. And at that point, we knew Jackson.
It's the classic one last job trope, right?
Yep.
Like it's like the cop's last shift on duty. Also, Jack wears a red kerchief. It's the closest thing to a Star Trek red shirt we're gonna get.
Red shirt, yeah.
Although I will tell you, I had forgotten this episode from my childhood, and I was more inclined to think it was going to be Jacob because we never hear his last name. But when I looked it up on IMDb, it's Jacob Jacobson. That's why.
Talk about the letter J here. We have Jimmy. We have Jack. We have Jacob Jacobson. We'll have the hard on for the letter J.
Yeah, well, that was very popular in the 70s. Like, I can't complain. Me and my brothers are all the letter C, although I go by Joey now because I'm just a rebel without a cause. But anyway, yeah, one last song. And out of his pocket, he has a piece of rawhide that binds them two together as friends because Lord knows Charles doesn't stop when he clearly hears the guy walking behind him if he's supposed to be this great tracker hunter dude. Yeah. Like, you don't hear the guy like jangling his pack behind you, running up to catch up to you. You just keep walking along. So,
and he gives him the rawhide to tie his boot together. And then they're camping, and later that night, Jacob Jacobson shows up, who's Swedish,
yes,
of the Yumpen Yemeni kind, and he actually says that. And he's also looking for work because everybody's crops destroyed.
Yeah,
that was a massive hailstorm.
Yes,
and he gives Pa a new pair of boots.
Right, so he's got to one up him, right? Jack gives him string, and now they're best buds. And then Jacob Jacobson shows up, and he's got a pair of boots that he was going to sell to save his family, but it's okay, Pa. You can have them for free because you gave me a couple of bites of stew.
Yeah, you'll pay me some.
And so then Jack has to up it again, and so he says, "Hey, you ever worked in a mine?
In a quarry? Yeah.
I can get you a job." Now, I will tell you that it was a good image joke at this point because he asks him what they do. And he says, what happens if the guy, misses when he goes to hit the pin? And he's like, well, then he's picking his nose with his elbow.
Yeah.
And then Michael Landon and so Charles and Jacob both wiggle their nose at that point. Like, let's get the itchiness out right now, just in case.
Yeah. So they're going to a quarry where Jack has previously worked as a powder monkey.
Yes.
He works the dynamite. And what they're doing is they're like, they don't have drills. So they do a pin and a sledgehammer. And one guy holds the pin, the other guy swings, and they drill a hole in large rocks. And then powder monkey comes in with dynamite and blows the
rocks up.
The rocks up. Surprisingly close to other people.
Yeah, like never tells them like fire in the hole.
Fire in the hole, bang. There's very little warning, and the guys are just like, ah. So,
yeah, there are no OSHA standards at this point.
No.
Because he throws them in everywhere. He throws it in the outhouse and thinks it's funny.
He's like willy-nilly with the dynamite, but we're told they get this whole spiel where the dynamite is fine as long as the fuse and the connector is not.
The cap isn't on.
The cap, yeah, as long as that's not attached. And as long as the fuse is not lit, you're good. It's safe. You can do anything with it. But apparently not. But anyway, they start work at this quarry. And Jacob and Pa are the pin and mallet men.
Right.
And they're immediately really good at it.
Well, except for Jacob misses at one point, and then Pa's hands are all red. And
I thought that was from swinging the mallet.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so at one point, both his hands are bloody, but then you find out it's really only his one hand that is bloody. It just bled onto the other one because they only ask him how his hand was after that.
So but they win a contest for, quickly smacking the pin. They're almost immediately good at this.
Well, they're better than this team that's been doing it for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So
okay, but it's $50 prize, so they got to win it.
They got to win it. Yeah.
Meanwhile, back on the farm,
Exactly.
Ma, the brains of the operation,
yes,
goes out to the wheat field and goes, you know what? There's wheat here.
There's still wheat here. It's just laying down.
Yeah. So we can.
Why are we just abandoning everything? The abandoned woman says, let's not abandon everything.
Mm-hmm. So we'll just do things the old-fashioned way. We'll make sheaves. We'll thresh it out by hand. We won't get as much wheat, but we'll get wheat.
But she gets all the women to come and show up at her place. And that's where we meet Willa the whiner. It'll never work.
This is a stupid idea. Shut up, Willa.
Like, go home.
And it's like, why did you show? Did you think there'd be free pie or something? But she shows up and she's like, look, we already have Harriet Oleson. We don't need Willa. So
which is why we only see her for the one episode.
Right. So. She's miserable the entire time. I think we could actually put her on the disappeared. And I personally think Ma probably did her in.
Yeah. No, I think she was under all the piles of wheat that they actually successfully milled.
On top of her.
Yeah.
Willa, but so they do it the hard way. And they get several bags of wheat. I'm assuming they do this for all the farms. You only see them doing it at the Eagles.
Yes, that was something I was going to talk about. Like, once again, are we doing an Mr. Edwards where Ma gets them all to come to her place and then she's like, screw the rest of y'all.
Yeah, well, I got my wheat. Good luck.
But let's be clear too. How does she know how to do this? Because she read it in the Bible.
That's right. Ma's a godly woman.
The Bible taught her how to glean it, and she did it. They didn't use Mr. Hansen's fancy machine. They did it themselves. They piled up the wheat. They made sure it dried properly. And it's actually a very fascinating process. And growing up in New England, I can attest that I remember as a kid, you would go on field trips and learn how to do this. And it's
never spoken of again. We don't know how much she sold the wheat for.
Well, we see pictures of it at the end. We see it being piled all into the one wagon. So it's been milled. But we never hear whether they sold any of it or if they just saved it for themselves to have flour for the season.
Fawn never mentions it when he gets home.
Yeah, I started noticing that there's a lot of loose ends. It's like, hey, we got to a happy point where the music can come in. We'll just end it here. Yeah, we're not going to. There's certain things we're just never going to explain.
Yeah.
Okay.
So back at the quarry, the inevitable happens.
Jack congratulates them on winning.
Yes, and then promptly explodes.
Explodes. Okay. And if we were to record this today, goo would have fallen on Charles and
it would have been raining
body parts. Yeah,
but
instead we see this focus on this
little smoke ring.
Smoke ring.
Little smoke ring. We're going to see some horrific deaths on this show. We really are.
But that is our first official death on the show.
Walnut Grove is a very dangerous place to live. But and I don't laugh at them all, but I have seen this episode so many times, and I laugh every single time because it is so cartoonish the way Jack dies. It's like, hey, Charlie, fool, and that's it. Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't leave his boots standing with smoke coming out of them. And I'm like, where was the dynamite?
Yeah,
where's he's not holding it, because if he were holding it, he'd lose an arm.
Yeah,
but I don't think he would be obliterated. So where was he storing the dynamite? Where'd you put the dynamite, Jack? Where was the dynamite?
He just decided not to watch the competition, but somehow he heard they won while he was sitting out there just poking dynamite into everything.
Dynamite into where? Where is he putting the dynamite?
Yeah.
I don't know. But this man is completely obliterated.
Yeah. So I know that we've now gotten to that point, but I do want to circle back a little bit because you had mentioned off camera that Pa doesn't cry in this episode, but I would like to contest that even though he doesn't cry at Jack's death, there is a scene where they're all lying on their cots relaxing in the middle of a sun-bright day. They're like lying on the cots, and Pa goes like this with his eye, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "No, I'm thinking of home."
Oh, he was reading a letter.
No, but he rubs his eye.
He rubs his eye. So, okay.
So he had like a little. We didn't see a full-on cry, but he was tearing up. And then they all tell the story of like what they're missing about how his kids and how he's back there. And then we find out that Jacobson's wife is pregnant, and he leaves her alone, and she's out to here about to pop any
like
minute.
8 months pregnant.
And so they ask him if he has any kids, and his answer is, "I don't know." Which in the 70s or the 80s could mean something totally different. Like, you're a baby daddy for 20 people. Like, Jacobson, I would have never known you were about, you know? No, it's because he left his pregnant wife at home.
Yeah.
Also, I want to talk about one other thing we haven't talked about. There is a scene back in Walnut Grove where all the women are lined up, waiting for the mail in this really small town. And the women are like, "Hey, my name is so-and-so. Do you have a letter for me?" There's 20 people in the town. They all fit in the church. We know who you are. But anyway, Ma gets money with her letter. Pa writes the worst letter ever. He's like, "Hey, things are going well. I hope to see you too. I think of you guys every day." That's it. Like, it's a readable letter. She actually literally hands it to Laura, who's at the earliest level of education, because she could read it. But she has a stack of money, and she sticks it in the purse. We then go over, and we don't see the pregnant lady there, because clearly she can't walk to town because she's pregnant. But Jack's wife, the one that said don't go, gets a letter, and she's immediately talking about how bad his spelling is, and there's nothing in the letter. He didn't send her a dime.
Yeah, so what's he doing with the cash?
Because where's he spending it? He's stuck in a quarry, so he didn't send her the money. So I want to talk about that, because then once he's blowed up, suddenly the job is over.
The entire job. Everyone goes home. It's like, we don't need stone for railroads anymore.
Right. This one guy died who warned us that if, like, you missed the hand, the arm would just end up coming off. So clearly they've seen death and dismemberment before, but now they're gone. And so he just goes to Charles. He's like, "Hey, here's his remains. Here's his saddlebag. And here's your $25 money winding, and here's his pay." And so Charles sticks his pay in his pocket. He sticks Jack's pay in Jack's bag. And then he sticks his winnings in the bag. And then Jacobson, whose wife has been pregnant, sticks his money in the bag.
Keep in mind, Jack has a teenage son.
Yeah.
He's got James at 15 at home.
Spoiler.
I'm sorry. His son was
take away my little bit of information. I don't have much in this world, but go ahead and take it from me. So, all right. Yeah. Jake Peter's son is played by Lance Kerwin, who you may recognize if you've ever heard of James at 15 or James at 16. There's a bit of trivia I really want to get in there, but yeah. So they go back once again. Pa sees Jacob. Jacob's wife comes out and holds up the baby. "Hey, it came!" And he goes running up the hill, and Pa stays in the road, doesn't come up to meet this woman, doesn't ask to use her bathroom or get something to eat. Clearly they slept on the road, right? Like, we saw that scene. So why doesn't he ask to stay there for the night before heading on? But he doesn't do that.
Cup of coffee.
Yeah, he doesn't do that.
The baby.
And it, like, so, Jacob's like, it's a boy far across the field. Also, can we talk about the fact that like this hailstorm devastated everything, yet we see them walking through grass, like tall
and
grass
trees and shrubs. Nothing is broken except the wheat. It was like God looked down and went, I'm just going to target the wheat. Everybody's wheat is gone.
Yeah, so then Pa says, Charles walks up and says, your dad was a good man. I don't live that far. I just live 10 miles. Why don't you come over? You could go fishing sometime. And he's like, well, maybe I will, but I got a lot of work to do because my dad just died.
Plus, he does a little spit thing that his dad used to do, to rub the nose.
Yeah, so that's played by Lance Kerwin. And Lance actually has several connections to Little House on the Prairie. So James at 15, which comes out a couple years later, Melissa Sue Anderson was actually in that first episode with him. So she has that connection with him. And then in 1970, so that's in 1977. In 1976, Lance Kerwin actually plays a young Michael Landon in The Loneliest Runner, which is an semi-autobiographical.
No sense, because he looks nothing like it.
Yeah, but it's like, again, so a semi-autobiographical story of Michael Landon, although the character's name in that is not Michael Landon. So, and then in 1985, Lance Kerwin does an episode of the Fairy Tale Theater that was done by Shelley Duvall with Melissa Gilbert. So he continues to have that connection. So that was interesting. But the interesting thing to me is we've got Jack, who's played by Don Knight, Jack Peters, the spit and nose guy. And then he actually was in 3 episodes of Bonanza, which is Michael Landon's previous series. So it's like, hey, I know this guy from my previous series. And he was in 3 episodes as 3 different characters. So he was a repeat player. And we're going to start to see this theme that a lot of these characters, at least in season 1, have been in Bonanza or Gunsmoke. They've been in one of these serials where you need a lot of unique village people because they disappear and never come back again. But Jacob Jacobson, so he was not in any Bonanza episodes. However, he does end up in a Highway to Heaven episode, which is Michael Landon's next big series after that. But you might have thought he looked familiar because he actually was Cletus Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yep.
He plays Deputy Cletus Hogg. So anyway, so that's just a little trivia from there. That I thought was interesting. But yeah, so that was the 100-mile walk.
Yeah, because Pa just goes home and that's it. It's like,
and then they just see him, never talk about all the hard work that Ma did.
None of that. About, some guy blew up and his kid lives down the street.
And he rides back with the horses that he sold back. So he stops in town. To get the horses again. And renegotiates the horses with his money before coming home. Anyway, so that's a 100-mile walk.
Yeah, maybe discuss it with your wife who actually harvested your damn grain by hand.
Yeah, maybe that would be a good idea.
But yeah, we never see Jacob Jacobson, wife or baby, ever again.
No.
We never see Jack Peters' family ever again.
Well, and here's the thing, and it's a perfect lead into the next episode. The next episode starts because I watched them back to back, and it opens on a lake with you're back to somebody in a boat, and I'm like, oh, he took him fishing. No. Now we're in Mankato, that place that was so far away, and Pa is suddenly back there.
Yeah. So yeah, this is Mr. Edwards' Homecoming, and first off, the title of this episode has a grammatical error in it that has always bugged me.
Yes.
Because the man's name is Isaiah Edwards with an S.
Plural. Yep.
Mr. Edwards' homecoming should be Mr. Edwards' homecoming. There should be an apostrophe after Edwards. Instead, it's apostrophe S. So
yeah,
it's just it's a minor thing that has always bugged me about this damn episode. They just got his name wrong.
Yeah, so we see this boat, we see the fishing, and then we see that it's going into a dock because clearly in the middle of
Walnut Grove, there's no
Walnut Grove, that the best way to travel is by river. So
I will say, wait a minute, there is a lake next to Walnut Grove, and we'll get to that in a couple.
Yeah. But so Pa is there.
Mankato running grain for Lars Hansen.
Yeah, and bringing back supplies for the Olsons for the mercantile.
Could they not give him that job last episode?
You know, things that make you go home. But he didn't have the horses back then. But whatever. And then he says to the guy who's loading up the wagon, I'm going to go get a present for my wife. And what happens? He walks into a bar and he finds Edwards. Now, of all the presents that Carolyn would ever want, is Edwards really the present
she wanted? Oh, great, a belligerent drunk. Thank you, Charles. And Victor French plays a belligerent drunk very well.
Yes. A little too well.
Yeah.
As if firsthand.
Yeah.
And so
incidentally, we're all back to Charles now. Nobody calls him Charlie here.
Yeah, back to Charles. He breaks a window. Edwards breaks a window, and then Charles gets Edwards down to the dock, which is not a very big dock, by the way. This is like a little dock. And he starts dunking this big man's head in water. This guy who's just busted a window and has a whole crowd of men doing the Mary, standing frozen still, unable to do anything. And he gets him down and keeps dunking in his head as water. And then Mr. Edwards says, I'd rather be drunk than drowned. And he's like, well, you're about half and half right now. So anyway, go on.
But he convinces Edwards to come back to Walnut Grove with him, stay with the family, see Laura, and Edwards agrees. So they come back to Walnut Grove, and they put
Edwards sleeping on the back. Yeah.
Yeah. Once again, Edwards isn't doing much work here. He didn't. He's just sleeping.
We get to hear Carrie say a word. She says, "Pa," as she sees them coming down.
Yeah. So she said a word.
Yes.
Did Charles just give up farming? Is he working full time?
I guess he's waiting for the next season to grow more wheat.
We have no time frame as to when this occurs.
Right. So it sounds like
it could be anywhere.
So we're going to use that as the reason that
But he stays with the Ingalls, and Ma immediately is like, "Oh, I can set him up with the widow Snyder." First night there. Oh, Grace Snyder. I can set him up with Grace Snyder. Jesus, Mom, let him settle into the town before you get him married.
Well, she wants him out of her.
She wants him out of her barn.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this is the man that saved us in Kansas, and he was staying in Mankato in a hotel. But let's bring him back and stick him up in the hay in the only loft in town.
Well, they don't have a
town that Mr. Edwards is quick to point out has no saloon.
No saloon.
Yeah.
And he immediately gets a job with Hansen too. It's like, okay,
because Pa says he's a really good worker, but yet when they get to town, Pa takes the first big barrel in, and Edwards just kind of looks around the town and goes, "There's no saloon."
There's no saloon.
Then Pa comes back out, gets the second big thing, and that's when Edwards finally picks up a sack of grain and brings it in. That's as much work as we see him do that first round.
We've not seen him do much work here, but Hansen hires him immediately, and this is where we get Edwards' backstory.
Yeah,
because this is when he says that he had a wife and a daughter, and they died of smallpox. And
because we come home and we find out Laura's sick.
Yeah, Laura's sick.
Laura's got a fever. She's glistening. She has glycerin all over her.
Yeah.
She has tonsils. Yeah.
mad, like weirdly mad at Pa
Yeah.
and Ma because
And like Pa was like, I just walked into the house. I didn't know she was sick.
But he's, where's the doctor? Where's the doctor? But we learned that his wife and daughter died of smallpox, and he blames himself because he thinks he brought it home.
Yeah. And so that's the first fever death story that we've gotten.
Yeah.
So we had our first death last episode with Jack Peters. And now we have our first story about a death due to the fever, the egg, as they use ague, whatever you called it, depending on how you were doing it. We also get the first intro of the Old Man Tucker theme.
Oh my God.
And Mr. Edzard
is ever do a drinking game with Old Man Tucker on this episode. You will die of alcohol poisoning. It is. But 5 seconds.
Mr. Edwards is one of the only townspersons that has a theme song whenever he comes on screen.
Yep. Yeah. And it's constant in this episode. It is constant.
Yeah.
This is my problem with this episode. In an effort to humanize Isaiah and give him this backstory, they made him come off as very creepy here.
Yes.
Not just in the way he got very angry at Mom and Pa when they're sick.
It was instantaneous. Yeah.
Yeah. The way he talks about the girls. He calls them my girls a couple of times, and it's like,
well, and he says that Laura is a spitting image of his daughter. And so he feels a special connection to her, which in later seasons and later episodes, when people say that, bad things happen to the girls.
Yeah,
so we've been taught to think otherwise.
And I know they're not implying anything creepy here. It just comes off as a little odd.
Yeah.
Just to modernize, because they gave him this backstory. It's like, wow, he is latching onto these girls that are not his girls very tightly.
And Laura, who can barely swallow, now tells him she can spit farther than he can.
Yeah, she's fine now. Suddenly she's fine. But Ma decides Grace Snyder is the perfect match for Mr. Edwards, and she tries to invite her to dinner, and Grace is like, oh no, I got other things to do, honey.
She never says what it is. She's just like, no.
No.
And we have the second conversation about lemon verbena.
Verbena, yes, because Isaiah apparently takes a shine to Grace.
Yep.
Okay, so first off, he finds the jug. So he's working at the mill, and there's a jug floating in the water wheel area.
And he gets very excited because he thinks it might be...
It's alcohol. But it's not. It's just... I think it's empty. But he
turns around and fills it with water.
Water that he is standing in with filthy boots from the water wheel. And I'm like, oh, you're not going to drink that, are you?
But he does.
That's why your wife and daughter got sick. But yeah, he fills this water jug up just in this dirty water. And of course, Grace sees him and thinks that he's drinking on the job.
So she leaves the post office.
Yeah.
She crosses the street. She sees he's away. She sniffs the water and realizes it's water. And then Mr. Hansen comes in, who seems to have a little thing for her. And she doesn't even make a pretense of why she was possibly walking over there. Because then when Hansen says something about, or Edward says something about getting back to work, she's like, okay, and turns right around and goes back to the post office.
Yeah, so now it's their little thing. She comes over and gets water, and Hansen thinks that she's a lush.
Yeah.
Because he thinks it's alcohol, which... Why would you want your worker to have a jug of alcohol around saws at a sawmill? If you think that's alcohol, Hansen, you need to have a talk with your employee. But he thinks that Grace is a lush and that she's drinking alcohol on the sly.
And clearly he's a gossip, because that Sunday in church,
we get fire and brimstone. This is before they pacified Reverend Alden, because he's like, the devil's drink.
And Hansen goes, what'd you think of that, Grace? What'd you think of that? Sermon, Grace? And she's like, I felt like the sermon was a little long.
Yeah. So Edwards decides he's going to try and make Grace jealous, because she's not like warming up to him other than drinking out of his water jug.
Because of a story that the girls told.
That the girls told him, about a girl in school
Oh, no, Sunday school. This is what they learned in Sunday school.
This is what they learn in Sunday school rather than Bible verses. They learn that what's her face likes what's his face, and she tried to make him jealous by talking to another, or by saying that another boy liked her or something like that.
No, that so-and-so was infatuated with this girl, and this girl wouldn't give him the time of day till another girl started paying attention to him. Yeah. And then all of a sudden she was mad at the other girl for paying attention to the guy that had love with her, because just because she didn't want him doesn't mean anybody else could have him. Yeah.
So Edwards has Laura write an envelope. He's going to fake a letter to himself.
And use the lemon verbena that he gifted to Laura, because that's an appropriate gift to give to an 8-year-old, is a bottle of toilet water.
A bottle of lemon verbena. That's weird. Again, they're making him seem creepy here. But he sprinkles lemon verbena on the letter and mails it to himself.
And he has to go. He accosts the mail people. And they're like, "You're going to Mankato? When you get to Mankato, could you mail this back to Walnut Grove?"
Mailing the letter to yourself? I didn't ask you to butt in on my business.
He's like, "Why are you wasting a whole penny on this?"
It was my penny. So Grace gives it to him, and he's all like, reading his letter, which is, completely blank, and smelling it because she can smell the lemon verbena. And so
just crazy, yeah.
But she doesn't really get jealous. She just agrees to go to dinner.
Well, that was also, he actually put on the charm. He didn't need the verbena, just made him interesting. But what he put on the charm when she came over to get a second drink of water.
Yeah, so he didn't need the letter at all.
No, because he said the whole thing about fishing for pike and how she hadn't had it in a long time. And he's like, Caroline will be so furious with me if I do not force you to come home to dinner with us. Because if she finds out you wanted pike and we didn't feed you pike, then all hell will break loose. Yeah. Because that's the type of woman Carolyn seems to be. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Willa disappeared from the last episode. We don't know.
But so anyway, yeah. So
he goes to dinner.
Yep.
They're going fishing together, and they're hanging out together
for 2 weeks straight, and things seem to go pretty well. And Pa knows that because Pa has his shirt off while Ma's sitting there on the fence. Bingo card. Pa took his shirt off in this episode.
Pa took his shirt off for no reason at all. He's just working on something.
Yeah, can we talk about the fact that when he was in the previous episode, in the heat, in the quarry, the farthest he went to taking off any clothes was he got down to his winter underwear.
Yeah.
But here he is, now it's several months later, and for 5 minutes he's out there doing something with
suspenders and no shirt.
A suspender and no shirt. Yeah. With the pepperoni pizza on full display. So
things seem to be working out well between Grace and Isaiah, and they're doing the stuff for 2 weeks, and then she's like, he says, "You want to go fishing on Sunday?" And she's like, "Oh no, I have to go to church." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't go to church." And that was when this post office is closed. She just shuts down.
She shuts down big time.
Yeah. So, and I think this is really rude. First off, he has his reasons.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, the church holds 20 people. Obviously, they take it in rotation. Did she not notice he wasn't at church those 2 weeks?
She never asked him why he wasn't there. So then Carolyn decides, after having popcorn in bed in a previous thing, by the way.
Seriously, they're like in their clothes, Pa's reading, they're eating popcorn. I'm like, you're going to have kernels in your teeth.
And this is where you can see them out the front window, which it always appears like Carrie's room is separate from Ma and Pa's room. But in this scene, you can see Ma and Pa eating popcorn in bed through the front window. So something's a little askew there. But anyway, but she climbs up, and this is where we learn that Karen Grassel is only a couple episodes in, because she has not gotten down the climbing up and the climbing down in the skirt yet.
No, I'm actually reading her or listening to her memoir, Bright Lights and Prairie Dust.
Yeah.
She reads it. Excuse me, getting over some bronchitis. But she's
Maybe
actually.
you got the fever. You got the
Oh
egg.
no, I got that hail fever. I'm gonna come down and die. Jimmy, what about our 5 children? Um, but yeah, she's actually had an interesting life. And she narrates the book, so
Okay.
it's kind of, I'm about halfway through it, and she's dealt with some addiction, and her father had some addiction, but she was probably the most liberal cast member on this show. She was
Yeah.
very liberal. I think, and a lot of that snuck in with Ma on the show.
Although she was the one that was more racist in the beginning, but towards
Yeah, well, yeah, that because they were adhering to the book pretty closely
right.
for that first pilot. But yeah, she does not handle that latter very well.
No. But she goes up and she finds out that Mr. Edwards, sorry, family affair, Mr. Edwards is packing.
Yeah, he's gonna leave because Grace don't want him no more.
Can we talk about this for just a second? Okay, I know I'm very excited this time, but let's just talk about this for a second. We see him shoving clothes into his bag. Yet every single scene up into that, we see him wearing the exact same thing, including the torn pocket on his red and plaid shirt. Don't you think Ma, who's always sewing or doing something and every night, would have said to Mr. Edwards, let me fix the pocket on your shirt? And I point this out because she and he have this conversation about God that I don't feel is a very strong argument.
No.
She's like, why are you blaming God for the past? And then you're not giving God a place in the future. And it still doesn't explain why God allowed what happened to happen. She doesn't get into that. And honestly, as somebody who was formerly very conservative and now lives a more liberal lifestyle, I've heard those stronger arguments and they still don't fly. So there was not going to be a good resolution to it. So I'm okay with the fact that the reasoning was stupid. But basically she was like, but she was like,
her and Grace, they bully him into going to a church he doesn't necessarily want to attend.
But then he shows up in the church wearing clothes we've never seen him in. Like, where did he have this suit coat? Yeah. Where did he have this shirt? Because he certainly never wore them. Just even long. I mean, we've seen the man in his long underwear.
Yeah. But we've never seen this jacket.
So clearly, like, clothes are limited. Why didn't he give Ma the shirt so she could fix it? All that stuff. So,
but they bullied him into going to church, and then it's all right now. He's going to church. This kind of struck me as very mean. I don't know. He has his reasons for not. Incidentally, we get this tragic backstory for Mr. Edwards, but we don't go into Grace's late husband at all. She's a widow.
No, she's just a widow.
She's just a widow. I guess women get over it or whatever. but yeah, we don't talk about her backstory at all.
But let's talk about the actors for a little bit, because I do think there's some interesting stuff here. And I know we're keeping track of how, like, Pa doesn't cry in this, but he does take his shirt off.
And Man Does Not Say Charles. This is like 2 episodes where there's
very little of what we know. And Harriet Oleson commits no crimes.
Yeah, because we don't see her.
Yeah, we see Nellie for like a second that's it. And we'll see her more in the next episode. But so let's talk about it. So Grace Snyder. So here's the mistake that I made. I actually looked up Grace Snyder instead of the actress's name. And there is a Grace Snyder from the pioneer days. She was a very famous quilter. So I wonder, since Grace Snyder's not in the books, I wonder if they decided to find other people in the series and had the names. But the woman who plays Grace Snyder is actually an Emmy award-winning actress. She was married to William Daniels. So if you ever watched Boy Meets World and a bunch of other things, he was the voice of the Kit Car, and all that kind of stuff. What? And they were both doctors on St. Elsewhere, and they have a very unique trivia fact, because they were only the second married couple to both win Oscars on the same night. and that was back in 1986. So she was also in Gunsmoke. So she was not in Bonanza, but she was in a couple of episodes of Gunsmoke, which seems to be pretty common with these people.
Yeah,
but she was also one of the actors that also appears in Murder, She Wrote. And we're going to start to see that happen too. So it's like they go from Walnut Grove to Cabot Cove. That, like, if they don't die one place, they're going to die the other place. That just seems to be a theme we're going to start to see going forward. But she was in Murder, She Wrote. She was also in a couple of episodes of Gunsmoke. She was also in a couple of episodes of Hotel. And Hotel is kind of like Love Boat. It's kind of like Gunsmoke, where you have to have this cavalcade of new people that come through to have a story. So is that. So Victor French, he was actually in 18 episodes of Gunsmoke. And then he was 5 episodes of Bonanza. So that's where he met Michael Landon the first time. And of course, their friendship over the years is pretty famous. And they go on to co-star in Highway to Heaven. But even Carl Svensson, who plays Lars Hansen, was in both Gunsmoke and Bonanza. And that's where they met. Michael Landon met him. So all 3 of those main characters or main secondary actors all have connections to Gunsmoke or Bonanza. And that's probably where Michael Landon found out about them to bring them in. So
I guess the moral of this story is, if you want a little grace, you got to get good with God.
Or lemon verbena. It'll help you every time.
Every time.
So it's just the answer to everything.
Lemon verbena.
Yeah. Fishing and lemon verbena.
Lemon verbena. Yeah.
If you can't get them one way, can't hook them one way, hook them the other. All right.
Yeah, this one, I just, it's okay because it introduces Grace Snyder, and I do like that character, but I don't like the way they bullied him into going to church.
Yeah, well, we actually saw Grace Snyder in a previous episode, but we only saw her arms. She was the postmistress, so.
And I mean it when I say that they must take rotation in this church, because this church holds 20 people.
Barely.
I mean, if the entire Ingalls and Olsen family show up, that's half the seats right there.
Well, and when you go to the school, all the kids are there. So I actually noticed in some of the episodes with the church, the Sunday school is clearly happening somewhere else, like outside.
Where? I guess it's outside. Yeah.
It has to be outside, because how else would they know what the girls learned in Sunday school? Because when he's talking about the drinking and all that stuff, that's happening. They're not there. So
yeah. Okay. And that is our 2 episodes for this podcast.
Yes. So tell us what we're going to talk about next episode, Ma.
Next episode, we get the love of Johnny Johnson. We're back with the Jays. Johnny Johnson, Jacob Jacobson, and Jack Peters. And then If I Should Wake Before I Die, which is, I actually like that episode a lot. So
I did too. All right. Well, I can't wait to see it. So no crimes. Pa's shirt comes off once in these 2 episodes. No real Charles.
No, he cries once, maybe.
And Carrie speaks twice. She says, "Pa," and then she tells Mr. Edward, "Please stay," because the girls say, "Please stay."
Yeah.
So, but yeah, other than that, we'll see you next time.
See you next time on 2 Woke Bonnets, and thank you, Mikey, for our intro and outro.
We love you, Mikey. Bye. Bye.
Thanks for listening to 2 Woke Bonnets. To find out more and to download your bingo card, visit 2wokebonnets.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe wherever fine video and audio podcasts are played.